Awesome. So this is Derek, and we're lucky to have Derek here today. He's working on a project, GottaGoTO, and I'm going to keep the introduction short and let Derek tell you about the awesome work he's doing.
Oh, you're muted.
Remind you to go on unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Sorry about that. It's been a while since I've done one of these. So hi, everyone. My name's Derek Pokora, and I'm here to speak with you about a washroom mapping initiative that I've been working on with Toronto Public Space Committee and TOToiletCodes, and it's called GottaGoTO. I'll show the links and my contact information again at the slide at the end of the presentation, if anyone wishes to get in touch. So our primary goal is to connect Torontonians with publicly accessible washrooms and to advocate for a robust network of all-season public washrooms that are accessible to everyone. Public toilets are a human right, and in 2010, the United Nations General Assembly actually explicitly recognized the human right to water and sanitation and acknowledged that clean drinking water and sanitation are essential to the realization of all other human rights. So at the onset of the pandemic in March of 2020, the imposition of lockdowns meant that many businesses and public spaces shut their doors. So washrooms across the city, both publicly and privately owned, were no longer available. And while the province never explicitly mentioned public washrooms within the emergency orders, cities and towns across Ontario, including Toronto, closed them anyways, in part to keep people at home. And this slide just shows an image of an establishment's closed sign. Now we've entered the winter of 2021-22, almost 2 full years later, and many people in Toronto still continue to struggle locating and accessing washrooms. This is a slide of people's frustrations with washroom access on Twitter, be they publicly or privately owned. I can't really go through all of these and read them necessarily, but I've included the messages in the alt text of these images later if anyone needs it for accessibility purposes. And I've also censored a couple of expletives because people get really vocal and emotional on Twitter. It's almost like it's amplified. But I guess it shouldn't be surprising that people get upset when they encounter public washrooms are closed and they have to go really badly. So denying access to washroom actually denies people of their dignity. Denying access to public washroom also disproportionately affects our unhoused neighbors, taxi and rideshare drivers, essential delivery workers, pregnant women, families, childcare workers with children, the elderly, and those with both visible and invisible disabilities like, say, Crohn's and colitis or IBS, who might not actually even be able to leave home because they don't know where to go when duty calls. Leslie Lowe, in her book, No Place to Go, that's published by Coach House Books, has actually referred to this as a urinary or a bathroom leash. So where do you go when you gotta go? The City of Toronto has been quite active in updating its availability of washrooms during the pandemic, although locating where to actually go isn't really straightforward. There's this list from the City of Toronto, which was actually in response to COVID and their change in services. And then there's this, which is their spring and summer washrooms in their Toronto parks and recreation facilities. But who knows where any of these are necessarily when you have to go and you don't necessarily really know where this listing is located geographically. So you don't really have time to necessarily go through and search a spreadsheet and then cross-reference that with a map. Then there's also winter washrooms. So the City of Toronto Parks Winter Washrooms has 190 locations, but the map doesn't include the first listing of Toronto Public Washrooms that I showed, nor does it include Toronto Public Libraries or TTC washrooms. And both of these are agents under the City of Toronto Act of 2006. So the absence of a robust network of dedicated all-season washrooms means that in Toronto, people are having to use alleyways and parks and other public places as well to go. I'm not sure if anyone here has seen some of the, the public or the media coverage of this, or even just going to a park and, anecdotally seeing somebody have to run behind a tree because they have to go. I mean, I know myself personally that has actually been the case in some situations. So not only is it an issue for park users, but it's a serious public health issue. Hepatitis A, for example, is a virus that's transmitted through fecal and oral contact. So it's not just toilets that we need, but we also need sanitary hand washing facilities as well. So getting back to COVID and how this mapping initiative came to be, back in April of 2020, right after lockdowns, I was wondering how I could best help those disproportionately affected by the pandemic while mostly staying in isolation. I recognize that locating information and community resources can be overwhelming for people during normal times, let alone when you're in the middle of a pandemic and everything's constantly shifting. So I decided to start creating a map that consolidated community resources, and that included some washrooms. And I'm happy to know that it actually has helped some people. It's been viewed over 800,000 times since its initial creation. And then it's been shared by Toronto Drop-In Network, which works with the unhoused people, public health, and was actually featured on blog.to back in December of 2020, so a little over a year ago. But it turns out I'm not the only one who's actually been trying to help Torontonians to locate washrooms. TOToiletCodes has actually gotten a lot of awareness. They created a Twitter account that crowdsources and shares the access codes for washrooms across the city via Twitter and a Google spreadsheet and a map. And the creation of the map has, it includes access codes for private businesses and that demonstrates really the increased need and demand on the access to public washroom facilities when the reliance on privately owned businesses is leveraged in the absence of these spaces. Then in the summer of last year, I began attending Toronto Public Space Committee washroom advocacy workshops. So when I found out about them, and during these workshops, we began collaborating on how to verify status and features of washrooms and provide Torontonians with access to a more comprehensive and complete map. And if you're interested in attending future washroom advocacy workshops, please connect with TPSC on social media. Linda's on this call as well. Hi, Linda. On Twitter and on Facebook, or by signing up for their email newsletters at the bottom of their webpage at www.publicspace.ca. So there's a little plug for them. So I thought I would take this opportunity to basically provide a really quick demo and then look at the feedback form. And I recognize that, at Civic Tech Toronto, this for me, it feels like a very low tech solution to something that could be even bigger or more streamlined. So I'm hoping we can develop a bit of a conversation around that. So let's see, I will bear with me for 2 seconds. We'll open up the GottaGo map. And provide a quick overview of this. So I heard, I'm sorry, I forgot the person's name who mentioned it, but I too am grateful for Toronto Public Libraries, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm not sure if you're aware, but a bunch of Toronto Public Libraries have actually been temporarily closed. Out of the, I think it's just over 100 libraries, 44 of them have had to close temporarily due to staff shortages as a result of COVID. So the remaining staff has actually been distributed to the other remaining libraries that are remaining open. So I don't think anyone's losing their jobs or anything like that. And it's supposed to be just temporary. But I thought that would be highlighted in here. And that's actually one of the most recent updates. So if you look down here on Toronto agencies, I've updated it to include the closed libraries. So within this map, I basically have it divided into different groups. And for the sake of time, I'm going to focus on the map itself. So feel free to review any of the links in your menu on your own time if you wish to learn more about it. And I'm going to do this just basically so everyone can see how it works, and then to demonstrate how someone could orientate themselves if they wanted to. And if you're on a mobile device, when you do open this, there'll be like a square on the top right-hand corner, and I would advise you to click on that to expand it. And if you are an Android user, that will actually open it up in Google Maps, and then that would actually show you how to orientate yourself. So within this project, we made a couple of slight adjustments to Google's map just to make it a little bit more inclusive. We basically changed the icon so that it is a toilet icon, or if it's a portable, it's the actual image of the portable washroom, just so that we could be gender neutral. And then we've, like I said, we kept this in different layers. So we've got fountains. I included those as water sources. There's TOToiletCodes, and I've separated these. We've separated these by different sources. And the reason for that is twofold. One is because of functionality, and two is for the target audience. So for example, Toronto Drop-In Network, I've kept into one layer for toilets, showers, and washrooms. And that's primarily because those agencies serve the unhoused community. So, you know, they actually don't want members of the general public to necessarily drop in there. It's primarily targeted for people who are unhoused. Now, the City of Toronto, that would be that layer that I showed earlier with the COVID adjustments layer. And I've also included the out of service automated washrooms. If anyone's familiar with those are the automated washrooms where you throw a quarter in through Astral Media to access those. Unfortunately, those are closed during the winter. I'm not actually sure why, because I believe they should be winterized. There's verification that is required on that, but they cost roughly, you know, $500,000, or I believe, to actually create. So you would think that that amount of investment into one washroom would actually warrant something being open year round. Now, Toronto summer parks are closed during the winter. They close around Thanksgiving time, and then they reopen back when the weather starts to change again. So the default, I've unhighlighted them and they're not present. And then there's an accessible layer, and that basically combines all of the other layers and replicates them into another layer that is for all the washrooms that are considered to be accessible. And when I say accessible, I mean that solely in terms of washroom accessibility for people who are in wheelchairs, recognizing that there are all different kinds of abilities and issues surrounding access. So if you were to scroll in and try to find out where you are, let's say we are at Yonge and Bloor, and we wanted to check a washroom. TTC washroom here would give you the information of its approximate hours, and they're open. And that is unfortunately a restricted access washroom due to the fact that it's you have to pay to actually enter the TTC. Now I've added some additional information here as well, if you wanted to see their website and the actual source, and that included the date of entry. So if somebody were to be curious as to how recent something has been updated, that date would tell them, you know, the last time that this was updated. And one last thing I want to show on this map is that in the legend is the description, providing some notes, and then as well to solicit feedback, there's a link that actually redirects you to the feedback form. So let's say you showed up at a washroom and you realize that the washroom is closed when it should be open, or it's reported to be open by the source, then you could actually provide that information in this feedback form, which is actually in 3 sections. The first section provides it's all required information, but it's mandatory information that actually verifies the access of that washroom. The second and third crowdsourcing forms, layers to this form actually provide feedback on more granular information, like, is it a gender neutral washroom? Is there access to sanitation? Is it accessible? Extra details in addition. So that's the map in essence. Excuse me, I'll open that back up. I don't know why it's not. Seems to think I have 2 copies of this open, or 1 copy when I have 2. So that's basically an overview of the map. Let's see, I'll go back into the slideshow. So now that we've created this map, and we keep it updated somewhat regularly, it's over time provided us with some insight as to actually what's going on with Toronto washrooms and access to washrooms. So we've conducted some preliminary analysis Toronto Public Space Committee has actually been working with U of T master's students in planning to actually review access and the availability of public washrooms. So as you can see here from their study, this is a comparison of public summer washrooms and then those available in winter. And it's pretty plain to see on the left, there is access to a lot more washrooms than there are within the winter months, just because many public washrooms in parks that are run by Parks and Rec are actually not winterized. So the vast majority of those tend to close down because they actually have to turn off the water because the pipes will freeze. So
Derek.
this is actually, oh,
Sorry to interrupt you. I don't see your slides. Do other people see the slides?
is it?
No, good point, Tim.
Oh, thank you for pointing that out. Apparently I'm really bad at this.
Oh, no worries. I only caught on when you said, as you'll see. And I was like, I don't see.
Yes, I definitely thought you were freestyling. Sorry, Derek.
I only wish I could be that cool. All right, are we back on track?
Perfect.
Wonderful, thanks for pointing that out, I appreciate it. So as you can see here, I'll repeat that, sorry. The summer washrooms, there's an increased access. There's more availability to washrooms. And if you look in the legend, the facility type shows the typology of washrooms. So there's summer park washrooms, portable toilets that have actually opened up during COVID. The city was actually quite proactive in expanding the availability of washrooms through portable toilets, and the deficiency, given the deficiency and the closing of existing sites. I think there was just such public demand that they realized the urgency of the issue and started opening up more portable toilets. The green dots are recreational center showers, and then the purple are the recreation center washrooms. Now in the winter, many have closed down, but you'll see the typology of the availability of those washrooms does shift and change a little bit. So there's, recreational facilities like rink buildings, those washrooms start opening up as well. So even though there's more typologies in the map on the right, there's actually fewer overall washrooms that are publicly available. Now I've done some I'm calling this back of the envelope or napkin math, just basically reviewing the different types of washrooms, given the operator or agency of those washrooms. And then I ascribed or I placed a permanence category to these. So anything that is a fixed washroom in a building that can be available year round is considered to be a permanent washroom. The Astral Media coin operated washrooms, skating rinks, and public summer park washrooms, those are considered semi-permanent just because they're not necessarily winterized. And I've kept that Astral Media within the semi-permanent because it's the awareness of whether or not it is winterized, I'm not sure. So I've kept those as semi-permanent. And then the temporaries are just the portable toilets. So this I kind of cross-referenced with the actual numbers that while mapping kind of provided us the snapshot over time of the availability and the number of those washrooms that was available in Toronto. And if then I took that and basically did some math and figured out how many washrooms were available per 100,000 people. So at, prior to COVID, there were 11.7 washrooms available publicly for every 100,000 people. Every 100,000 people. And in a city of 3 million people, like that's not a lot of washrooms. So, and then when we look at what happened during COVID and fall, winter, like even still previous to COVID, it went down to about 6. So that's a really underwhelming number. The response after COVID, actually with the availability of those increased number of portable toilets or porta potties brought that up to over 16. But then again, during the fall, winter, I should say 2021, 22 has brought that back down again. So even now in fall, winter 2021, 22, we still haven't even gone back up to the level that was the previous to, the initial lockdown in March of 2020. But then I kind of went, okay, well then what's possible given the current infrastructure? And if we took away all the portable toilets, because that's, a very stopgap solution. They don't have, hand washing facilities. They could disappear, at the drop of a hat if a contract falls through or whatnot. So I said, given the existing infrastructure, what could we retrofit and what could be made to be built out without creating a new building. So if we took all of those, we'd be up to almost 18 washrooms per 100,000 people. So it's still not a lot. I'm aware that the city of Toronto has, within their budget, they're working on winterizing some of the park washrooms. At present, there are 3 washrooms that they will be doing it as well, and they're currently in process, so they're closed. And I know for one of them, it's over 200,000, or sorry, I think it's $2 million actually, that they're investing at Allen Gardens to upgrade one of their washrooms. But when you put all of your money in a pile to work on one washroom, it's, that budget is going to come at the expense of winterizing other ones. So I use this preliminary analysis to try to inform how we can go forward with trying to, potentially encourage the city to provide more publicly accessible toilets. And this is just a visual representation of, of that progress over, 2019 through now. We're still, not to where we were prior to COVID. So this I'm an urban planner by trade. So I immediately tend to look at, are there different sociological or physical barriers to access? So knowledge of where washrooms are located, there is definitely a gender disparity in accessing washrooms that disproportionately affects women. There's a financial barrier, like the example of TTC I provided earlier. If, let's say, an unhoused person wants to go, they might not have the $3 to be able to get on TTC in order to use a washroom. Washroom security codes in privately owned establishments. I know that there was, I'm forgetting the number of the bill, but the city or the province of Ontario created the bill to actually provide access for delivery people servicing a business, be they an Uber driver or say a delivery person for delivering to something for that business, that they'd be able to use the washroom. Well, I find that the leveraging of that actually detracts, it pulls away from the awareness of the issue that is, we really need publicly accessible washrooms. TTC drivers are disproportionately affected by this all the time. TPSC, a couple members and myself, we went on a tour, and during that tour we noticed a TTC bus driver got off the bus and used the washroom because there was nowhere else to go. Auto-oriented planning is a large component of it. We've built the built form in our cities are actually directed so that we spend our time in cars. So you get in your car from your house and you drive through a city, down a street to get to your source. And then that's often a private business and where you can use a washroom there. Physical access comes along with that. There's sensory accessibility issues like visual impairment and sensitivities. Excuse me, that's a tough one. And then I'm hoping if there's others that could be brought to light. And then there's other digital accessibility considerations when, designing and creating this map and this initiative. This is really a convergence of digital and physical space. You need to access something digital to be able to access a physical space. So limitations can include access to a data plan, internet, or the ability to have a smartphone. The limitations of Google's architecture. We're grateful for the access to a free platform that shares the information, but given that this is a lower tech solution that we've worked on ourselves, lacking that technical prowess, it's been a matter of relying on the limitations. There's a 10-layer limit within Google. There's a 2,000 entry limit per layer on the mapping. So if there were more than 2,000, we wouldn't be able to do that. There's visual contrast and typographic considerations, alt text for people who might be visually impaired or other assistive devices that they need. And then when you're actually at the space, the physical accessibility considerations. Is there a barrier-free path of travel? Is there, barrier-free water closet stalls for somebody who has to go? Are there grab bars for somebody if, let's say they're elderly or they're in a wheelchair? Is there adequate lighting to the washroom and access to that washroom? I recognize, walking around at night, especially during winter because there's less daylight, if you need to use the loo and you go to, say, use a porta potty, it might not be well enough lit that you could see to get to the actual portable, let alone to actually use it when you're inside and there's no light in there. Braille signage being another one. So finally, next steps for us is that we're still hoping to gather and crowdsource additional washroom information through that form that was shown in the map. to continue conducting this analytical work, and then basically to seek outreach and promotion through events like this, and to get technical support and maybe an accessibility advisor. So that's my presentation. And if you want to get in touch, feel free to reach out to me. Best way is probably either through Twitter, or you can email me at torontowashrooms@gmail.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Derek.
Woo.
We've only got a few minutes, like 2 minutes here, so we can probably only do one question here, but I just want to double check, Derek, are you okay hanging around for just a few minutes? We can put you in a breakout room for anyone that wants to kind of ask some more questions about how they can get involved.
Yeah, sure, that'd be great.
Okay, awesome. And so thank you so much. That was an incredible presentation. I think we had one question earlier from Skyger, which I do think might be useful to everybody else that's in the room here, which was how did your work with TOILETCodes kind of get started? How did that partnership happen? We see a lot of civic tech projects that kind of get started, but we don't always see that kind of partnership and that community and that coordination aspect. So I think she was hoping to get a little bit of an insight into how that happened from your end.
Yeah, sure. So for me, it was primarily like creating this map was just about creating access. And I didn't necessarily have the specific lens of public or private initially defined. It was just how can people access washrooms given the lockdown? And when I saw that the work that TOToiletCodes had done, which is Michael DeForge and another anonymous person who's actually working on that file with him, had come out, they had actually published both public and private. And so this was a very similar mapping initiative. And between the conversation that was happening between Toronto Public Space Committee and TOToiletCodes, the effort of this map was like, well, let's take all those things and put them together and make a more robust, make a more complete map that could be available to everyone. So I had actually, I'm trying to remember who approached who. I remember reaching out to Michael. It's been a while, but we just started the conversation and then had a meeting, and Michael had totally said it's fine for us to use the information that they were collecting. And so we started just putting it all together.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Derek. So I am going to stop the recording now.